The first rule was simple. Never open the cabin door after midnight. The second rule was stranger. If someone knocks 3 times, turn off every light and remain silent until sunrise. But on my 4th night guarding the cabin, I found a new rule written beneath the others. It said, if you hear yourself knocking, do not look outside. I was alone in the northern wilderness. At least, I thought I was. The cabin belonged to a wealthy family from the city. They used it during the summer. But every winter, they hired someone to stay behind and protect the property. The nearest town was nearly 60 miles away. There were no neighboring houses, no working roads once the snow became too deep, and no cell service beyond the ridge. The pay was good. The job sounded easy. All I had to do was keep the generator running, prevent animals from getting inside, and report any damage when the owners returned in spring. The man who hired me gave me a ring of keys, a radio, and a folded piece of paper. These are the rules, he said. I laughed. He didn't. Read them every morning, he told me. And if anything changes, follow the newest version. I asked what he meant. He stared toward the snow-covered forest. You'll understand when you get there. The cabin stood beside a frozen lake surrounded by black pine trees. It was larger than I expected. 2 floors, a stone fireplace, and narrow windows facing the woods. The silence was the first thing I noticed. There was no wind, no birds, no sound except my boots pressing into the snow. Inside, the cabin was warm and clean. The rules were nailed to the wall beside the front door. There were 7 of them. Rule 1, lock every door before sunset. Rule 2, never open the door after midnight. Rule 3, if someone knocks 3 times, turn off all lights and remain silent. Rule 4, do not look into the forest between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. Rule 5, if the radio begins playing music, unplug it immediately. Rule 6, never answer a voice calling from outside. Rule 7, if the rules change, obey the newest version. The last rule bothered me. Rules weren't supposed to change. But I told myself it was a joke. Maybe the owners enjoyed strange traditions. Maybe the previous caretaker had invented the whole thing to scare the next person. For the first 2 nights, nothing happened. I chopped wood, checked the generator, cooked canned soup, and listened to the radio. The weather grew colder, but the cabin remained comfortable. On the 3rd night, I woke at exactly 2:17 a.m. Someone was standing outside my bedroom window. I couldn't see their face. The glass was covered in frost, and the figure stood perfectly still beneath the trees. I remembered Rule 4. Do not look into the forest between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. I shut my eyes. For nearly 40 minutes, I lay beneath the blankets, listening. Nothing moved. Then the floorboards outside my room creaked. 1 step, then another. Slowly, the sound stopped beside my bed. I kept my eyes closed. Something leaned close to my ear and whispered, "You forgot the new rule." When I opened my eyes, the room was empty. The bedroom door was locked. At sunrise, I went downstairs. A new sheet of paper had been placed over the old rules. The handwriting was different. The first 6 rules remained the same. But Rule 7 had changed. Rule 7. If you hear footsteps inside the cabin, do not investigate. They are looking for you. I checked every door, every window. Nothing had been opened. There were no footprints outside. That should have been impossible. The next day, I tried using the radio to contact the hiring office. Only static answered. Then a voice came through. My voice. Do not leave the cabin, it said. The radio went silent. I unplugged it. That night, I pushed a chair beneath the bedroom door and kept my flashlight beside the bed. At 12:43 a.m., someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. I froze. The rules said to turn off every light and remain silent. I switched off the lamp. The cabin disappeared into darkness. Another 3 knocks echoed through the house. Then a voice called from outside. Please. It sounded like a woman. I'm lost. I remained silent. Please, she said again. It's freezing. The voice moved closer to the window. I know you're inside. My hand tightened around the flashlight. Then she began crying. For nearly an hour, the crying continued. Eventually, it stopped. I waited until sunrise before turning on the lights. The front door was still locked, but something had been scratched into the wood. You should have let me in. Below the words were dozens of long marks, like claw marks. The next morning, the rules had changed again. This time, there were 8. The new one was written in red ink. Rule 8. If the woman asked to enter, do not refuse. I stared at the page. It directly contradicted Rule 2. Never open the door after midnight. But Rule 7 said to obey the newest version. And Rule 8 was newer. That was when I realized the rules weren't protecting me. They were making me choose. The following night, the knocking returned. 3 knocks. I turned off the lights. Then the woman spoke. Please let me inside. I remembered the new rule. Do not refuse. My heart pounded. What do you mean? I asked. The crying stopped. For several seconds, there was silence. Then she laughed. It was not the sound of a frightened woman. It was deep, dry, and far too close. Thank you, she whispered. The front door handle began turning, but the door remained locked. Something was already inside. I ran upstairs. The footsteps followed, slowly, one step at a time. I reached my bedroom and slammed the door. Then I heard a knock. 3 times. Not on the front door, on my bedroom door. The rules said nothing about that. I backed away. A voice spoke from the hallway. My voice. Open the door. I didn't answer. Open it, the voice repeated. You're breaking the rules. The handle turned. Then the voice began reading the rules aloud. Rule 1. Lock every door before sunset. The handle stopped moving. Rule 2. Never open the door after midnight. The voice became quieter. Rule 3. If someone knocks 3 times. 3 knocks struck the door. Turn off every light and remain silent. My flashlight flickered, then went dark. The voice continued. Rule 4. Do not look into the forest. The bedroom window slowly frosted over. Rule 5. If the radio begins playing music. Music started downstairs. A soft piano melody. Unplug it immediately. The voice paused, then laughed. You can't, it said. You're upstairs. I covered my ears, but the voice kept reading. Rule 6. Never answer a voice calling from outside. Then it whispered, Where do you think I'm calling from? The bedroom door opened. I never saw what entered. The darkness was too thick. But I heard breathing, and I smelled wet earth. Something crossed the room. The floorboards bent beneath its weight. Then it stopped beside my bed. You followed every rule, it said. I couldn't move, but you never asked who wrote them. A cold hand touched my face. The next thing I remembered was sunlight. I was lying on the floor. The bedroom was empty. Downstairs, every door was open. Snow covered the wooden floor. The rule sheet had changed again. There was only one sentence. Rule 1, leave before nightfall. I packed immediately. I grabbed my coat, food, and the keys. Then I ran outside. The snowstorm had stopped. The road was clear, for the first time in days. I felt hope. I drove for nearly 2 hours. But the road never changed. The same broken sign appeared again. The same frozen lake. The same line of black pine trees. Then I saw the cabin. I had driven in a circle. I tried again. The same thing happened. By sunset, I was back at the cabin. The front door stood open. A new rule waited beside it. Rule 1. You cannot leave until someone replaces you. I searched the radio for help. Nothing. Then, shortly after midnight, the radio began playing music. I unplugged it. The music continued. A voice spoke through the dead radio. Someone is coming. Outside, an engine approached. Headlights appeared between the trees. A truck stopped beside the cabin. A young man stepped out. He carried a backpack. He looked exhausted. When he saw me, he smiled. Are you the caretaker? He asked. I didn't answer. He held up a ring of keys. The company hired me, he said. They told me you'd be leaving. Behind him, the forest became silent. Then the rules on the wall began changing. The paper twisted. New words appeared. Rule 1. The old caretaker must leave before sunrise. The young man walked toward the cabin. "Is something wrong?" he asked. I looked at the rules, then at the dark forest. For the first time, I understood the cabin didn't need a guard. It needed a prisoner. Every caretaker was given rules. Every rule kept them alive. But every change pushed them closer to breaking one. And when someone new arrived, the cabin chose who stayed. The young man stepped inside. The door closed behind him. He looked toward the wall. "What are those?" he asked. The rules began changing again. I turned away. Then I walked outside. The truck keys were still in the ignition. I drove until the cabin disappeared behind the trees. This time, the road did not bring me back. By sunrise, I reached the town. No one believed my story. The hiring company had no record of me. The address where I had met the man was empty. And when I returned to search for the cabin, the road ended at the frozen lake. There was no house, no driveway, nothing. That was 5 years ago. But last winter, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It contained one rule. Rule 1. Never tell anyone what happened in the northern cabin. I had already broken it. And now, every night at exactly 12:43 a.m., someone knocks 3 times on my front door. I turn off every light. I remain silent. But last night, the knocking came from inside my bedroom. I still don't know what lives in that cabin. Maybe the rules were written to contain it. Maybe every caretaker became part of the place. Or maybe the cabin itself was alive, and it needed people to remember it. But I know one thing. The rules are changing again. This morning, I found a new message written on my bedroom wall. Rule 1, return to the northern cabin. And beneath it, Rule 2, bring someone with you. Remembered, I should have left the town the moment I escaped. Instead, I stayed. For 5 years, I tried to convince myself that the northern cabin had been nothing more than a nightmare caused by isolation, fear, and too many nights without sleep. I found work, rented a small apartment, and avoided talking about the forest. But the knocking never stopped. Every night at exactly 12:43, 3 knocks came from somewhere inside my home. Sometimes they came from the bedroom wall, sometimes from beneath the floor, and sometimes from inside my closet. I never opened it. Then one winter morning, I found a piece of paper lying beside my bed. It contained only one sentence. "The new caretaker is asking about you." My hands shook as I read it. The young man had replaced me. I had seen him enter the cabin. I had watched the door close behind him. But why was he asking about me? That night, the knocking came early. 3 slow knocks. Then a voice whispered from the other side of my bedroom door. "Please help me." It was the young man. "I followed the rules," he said, "but they keep changing." I stood frozen beside my bed. "You left me here." His voice became quieter. "And now it knows where you live." The lights went out. A cold wind moved through the room, even though every window was closed. Then I heard footsteps. Not outside, inside the apartment. They moved slowly toward my bedroom. One step, then another. I remembered the final rule from the cabin. Bring someone with you. That was what it wanted. It wanted me to return. And it wanted me to bring another person. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Then the voice whispered, "You have until sunrise." When morning came, the apartment was empty, but a trail of wet footprints led from my front door to the bedroom. At the end of the trail was another message. "The road is waiting." I looked through the window. Across the street, a black truck was parked beside the sidewalk. Its engine was running, and hanging from the rearview mirror was a ring of old keys, the same keys I had carried at the cabin. I knew I had only 2 choices. I could stay and wait for whatever had followed me home, or I could return to the northern forest. But this time, I would not follow the rules. This time, I would find out who was changing them. I took the keys from the truck. The moment my hand touched them, the engine stopped. For a few seconds, the entire street became silent. No cars, no voices, no wind. Then the radio turned on by itself. A familiar piano melody filled the truck, the same music I had heard inside the cabin. I reached the radio, but a voice interrupted me. "Do not turn it off." It was the young caretaker. His voice sounded weak. "Follow the road," he whispered. "And whatever you see, don't stop." The engine started again. I drove north. For hours, the road remained empty. Snow covered the fields, and dark pine trees appeared along both sides. Then I saw someone standing beside the road. It was a woman. She wore a thin white dress. Her bare feet were buried in the snow. As I approached, she raised one hand. I remember the old rule: never answer a voice calling from outside. So I kept driving. But when I looked in the mirror, she was sitting in the back seat. I slammed on the brakes. The truck stopped. The woman was gone. In her place was a new piece of paper. Rule 1, do not look behind you. I stared at it. Then something breathed against the back of my neck. "Why did you leave?" a voice whispered. It was the young caretaker. I kept my eyes on the road. "I'm coming back," I said. The voice laughed. "No," it replied. "You're coming home." The road narrowed. Soon, I recognized a frozen lake. The northern cabin stood beside it. But something was different. There were lights inside. Dozens of shadows moved behind the windows. I stepped out of the truck. The front door slowly opened. The young caretaker stood inside. His face was pale. His eyes were completely black. "You came back," he said. I looked at the wall. The rules were changing. The words moved across the paper like living insects. Then a final sentence appeared. Rule 1. Only one person may leave the cabin. The door slammed shut behind me. The lights went out. And somewhere upstairs, someone began knocking. 3 times. 3 slow knocks. Then 3 more. The sound came from upstairs, but the cabin was darker than I remembered. Even the moonlight could not enter through the windows. The shadows seemed to cover the glass from the outside. The young caretaker stood near the front door. His eyes were completely black. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. I looked at the wall. The rules were still moving. The words twisted across the paper, disappearing and returning in different places. Then a new sentence appeared. Rule 2. Do not speak to the caretaker after midnight. I checked my watch. 12:44 a.m. I immediately stepped away from him. The young man smiled. "You're learning," he said. I said nothing. The knocking upstairs suddenly stopped. For a moment, the cabin became completely silent. Then footsteps began moving across the second floor. Slow, heavy. Each step made dust fall from the ceiling. I remember the old rules. If you hear footsteps inside the cabin, do not investigate. But the rules had changed too many times. Every time I obeyed one, another appeared. Every rule seemed designed to make me afraid. And fear was exactly what the cabin wanted. The young caretaker moved closer. "You left me here," he whispered. I kept my eyes on the wall. I didn't know what would happen. "You knew enough." His voice became colder. "You saw the rules. You knew the cabin needed someone." The footsteps stopped above us. Then something scratched across the ceiling. Long nails dragged slowly from one side of the room to the other. The young caretaker looked upward. For the first time, fear appeared on his face. "It's awake," he said. The lights suddenly turned on. Every room in the cabin became visible. The furniture was covered in dust. The fireplace was filled with black ash. And standing at the top of the staircase was a woman wearing a white dress. The same woman I had seen beside the road. Her skin was pale. Her hair covered most of her face. She did not move. The young caretaker stepped backward. "Don't look at her," he whispered. A new rule appeared. Rule 3. If the woman is inside, never look away. I stared at the wall. Then I looked at the woman. The moment our eyes met, she smiled. Her mouth opened too wide. "You remembered me," she said. Her voice was soft, but it came from every corner of the cabin. I tried to move. My legs would not respond. The woman slowly walked down the stairs. Each step made the lights flicker. "You were here before," she said. "No," I replied. "I've never seen you." She stopped halfway down. "Yes, you have." The cabin began shaking. Pictures fell from the walls. The radio turned on by itself. The old piano music returned. Then I remembered something. 5 years earlier, on my first night in the cabin, I had seen a photograph hanging beside the fireplace. I had never paid attention to it. But now, I could see the photograph again. It showed several caretakers standing outside the cabin. Some were old, some were young, and one of them was me. The photograph looked ancient. My face was pale. My eyes were black. I stepped closer. The date beneath the photograph read, January 14th, 1986. That was impossible. I wasn't even born then. The woman reached the bottom of the stairs. "You always come back," she said. The young caretaker grabbed my arm. "Don't listen to her." His hand was freezing. "She changes the rules," he whispered, "but the cabin obeys them." "What is she?" I asked. He looked toward the woman. She was the first caretaker. The woman smiled. "Tell him the truth." The young man shook his head. "She stayed here during a storm. There were no rules then. She was alone for months." The woman slowly tilted her head. "And when spring came," she said, "no one returned for me." The lights went out. In the darkness, something moved across the floor. I heard dozens of footsteps. Not one person. Many. The lights returned. People were standing around the room. Every caretaker from the photograph. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were black. They watched us without moving. The woman spoke again. "So I made rules." The paper on the wall began changing. Rule 4. The cabin keeps everyone who breaks a rule. Another sentence appeared. Rule 5. The cabin releases one caretaker when another takes their place. The young man looked at me. "You understand now." I did. The cabin had never needed protection. It needed replacements. Every caretaker who entered became trapped. The rules kept them alive long enough to bring another person back. Then the old caretaker was released. That was why I had escaped. The young man had replaced me, and now I had returned. The cabin wanted to complete the cycle. The woman stepped closer. "Only one person may leave," she said. The young caretaker looked toward the front door. Then he looked at me. "You brought no one." I didn't know I had to. "You always know," the woman whispered. The walls began closing inward. The windows disappeared behind dark wood. The front door shook as if someone outside was trying to enter. 3 knocks echoed through the cabin. Then a voice called from outside. "Please let me in." It sounded exactly like me. The young caretaker covered his ears. "That isn't you," he said. But the voice continued. "I'm freezing." 3 more knocks. The woman smiled. "Open the door." The rules changed again. Rule 6. If you hear your own voice outside, you must let it enter. I stared at the words. Then I understood. The cabin was not asking me to open the door. It was trying to make me choose which version of myself would remain. The voice outside became louder. "Open the door." The cabin shook. The young caretaker grabbed my shoulder. "If you open it, we both stay." "What happens if I don't?" He looked toward the woman. "She chooses." The woman slowly raised one hand. Every caretaker in the room turned toward me. Their mouths opened, and together they whispered, "Choose." The front door cracked. Cold air rushed inside. For 1 second, I saw a figure standing outside. It looked exactly like me. Same face, same clothes, same frightened eyes. But it was smiling. Then the lights went out, and the rules disappeared. All except one. Rule 1. The person who remembers a cabin can never truly leave. The darkness swallowed the room, and something whispered beside my ear, "You were never the first caretaker." The whisper stayed beside my ear. "You were never the first caretaker." Then the darkness moved. It was not like the lights had gone out. The darkness had shape. It flowed across the walls and gathered around the people standing inside the cabin. The old caretakers disappeared one by one. First their faces vanished, then their bodies, until only the woman in the white dress remained. She stood a few steps away from me. For the first time, I could see her face clearly. She looked tired. Not angry, not monstrous, just tired. "How long have I been here?" she asked. I didn't answer. The young caretaker stood beside the front door. His black eyes were fixed on the woman. "Don't listen to her," he whispered. But the woman continued. "I stopped counting after the first 100 winters." The cabin shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The woman looked toward the moving walls. This place was never a cabin, she said. It was something older. A cold wind passed through the room. The first people built this house beside the lake because they believed the forest was empty. They were wrong. The floorboards creaked. Something moved beneath them. They heard voices at night, voices of dead family members, voices of people who had never existed. She looked directly at me. Then they made rules. The walls became covered with words. Hundreds of rules appeared. Some were familiar, some were impossible. Never sleep facing the window. Do not count the footsteps. If the lake begins speaking, cover your ears. Never trust a person who arrives after you. Then every sentence vanished. Only one remained. The cabin survives through memory. I finally understood. The rules aren't real, I said. The woman smiled. They are real because you believe them. The young caretaker stepped forward. Stop, he said. His voice changed. It became deeper, older. You're confusing him. The woman stared at him. You're not the caretaker anymore. His face twisted. Dark lines appeared beneath the skin. Then he smiled. You were never supposed to come back, he told me. The front door opened. Beyond it was a road. The snow had stopped. The black truck waited outside. The keys were still in the ignition. You can leave, the young caretaker said. I looked at the woman. What happens to her? She stays. And you? He smiled. I was never trapped. The cabin shook again. The woman grabbed my arm. Her hand was ice cold. Don't leave, she whispered. The words on the wall changed. Rule 1. Never trust a caretaker who offers you freedom. I looked at the young man. His black eyes had disappeared. Now they were completely white. The cabin lights began flickering. The woman pulled me toward the stairs. Come with me. We ran upstairs. Behind us, the young caretaker laughed. The sound followed us through the hallway. We entered the bedroom where I had spent my first night. Nothing had changed. The same bed, the same frozen window, the same chair beneath the door. But the wall was covered with names. Hundreds of names. Some were scratched into the wood. Others were written in dark ink. Then I saw mine. My name appeared more than once. The first date was nearly 40 years old. The second was 20 years old. The third was 5 years ago. And beneath them was a new date. Today. I stepped away. What does this mean? The woman looked at the names. You keep returning. No, you forget every time. The room began spinning. Images appeared inside my mind. I saw myself standing outside the cabin. Older, younger, wearing different clothes. Each time, I carried the same ring of keys. Then I remembered something I had forgotten. The man who hired me. His face. His voice. He had looked familiar because he had been me. I had hired myself. I had written the rules. The woman touched the wall. You discovered how the cabin worked, she said. You created the rules to survive. And the rules kept changing? Because every version of you became afraid of a different thing. The cabin groaned. The young caretaker was climbing the stairs. Slowly, one step at a time. You have to choose, the woman said. What choice? Remember everything or forget again. The door shook. A crack appeared in the wood. If you remember, she continued, the cabin will lose its power over you. And if I forget, you leave. But I'll come back. She nodded, and someone else will remain. The door broke open. The young caretaker entered. His face was no longer human. Darkness moved beneath his skin. You belong here, he said. The woman stood between us. No, she replied. Then every light in the cabin exploded. The room filled with white fire. I saw every winter, every caretaker, every rule. I remembered writing the first one. Never open the door after midnight. I remembered changing it. I remembered trapping people. Not because I wanted to, because I was afraid to stay alone. The truth hurt more than anything inside the cabin. I had escaped before, but every time I had brought someone back. The cabin had not forced me. I had chosen. The woman held out her hand. End it. I looked toward the wall. Then I spoke. There are no rules. The cabin became silent. The words disappeared. The floor stopped moving. The darkness pulled away from the walls. The young caretaker screamed. His body faded into the air. The woman closed her eyes. For the first time, she smiled. The front door opened. Morning light entered the cabin. I walked outside. The snow was melting. The forest was quiet. Behind me, the cabin began disappearing. First the roof, then the walls, then the windows, until only the frozen lake remained. The woman stood beside the water. "Will you remember?" she asked. "Yes." She nodded. Then she vanished. I returned to town. This time, the road stayed the same. The cabin never appeared again. Years passed. The knocking stopped. The nightmares disappeared. But last winter, I found a small envelope beneath my apartment door. There was no name, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. It contained one sentence. Rule 1. Never tell anyone the cabin is gone. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I burned the paper. That night, at exactly 12:43, someone knocked 3 times. Not on my door, not on the wall, from beneath my bed. I stayed silent. The knocking stopped. Then a voice whispered, "You remembered." I looked toward the dark window. Far beyond the town, somewhere in the northern forest, a single light appeared, and beneath it, a new cabin stood beside the frozen lake. But this time, there were no rules on the wall, only a photograph of me, standing beside the woman in white. And written beneath it were 4 words. The first caretakers returned.